Welkom bij een nieuwe aflevering van de Nederlandse Kubernetes podcast. De podcast over Kubernetes voor iedereen. Ik ben Ronald Kers en ik zit zoals altijd met de enige echte solutions architect van ACC.
Hallo Ronald. Oh, it's Jan.
Ja, Jan Stomphorst. Of heb je een naamverandering gedaan, Jan?
Ja, altijd.
Altijd zelfs? Oh,
ja, altijd andere naampjes, andere dingen. Ik denk dat we een heel leuk onderwerp hebben. Chaos Engineering. En
SRE.
Ja, ook nog. En iets met Kubernetes ook.
Then I will not leave the audience in suspense. I would like to introduce Miko, one of the organizers of the SRE Days London. Welcome, Miko.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure thing. So I work as an SRE. Started as a software engineer a little while back. You might have seen me talk about Chaos Engineering. I think I picked up in that Dutch intro. I didn't understand anything, by the way. I've worked primarily in finance as an SRE and kind of platform engineer kind of role for last decade. I spent a pretty long time at Bloomberg. I built a few things in there to do with Kubernetes. That was the place where I discovered Kubernetes. We were building a microservices platform back in the day, which was the idea to, give quants something to run their Python code in an easy way because they didn't know anything to do with deploying and monitoring applications, but they had some code to deploy. And we picked up Kubernetes. I remember we're evaluating that. There was the first conference in London, actually, that just happened down the road, just completely randomly from where I worked. I think that was 2015, 2016. I'm forgetting now. It's been a while. That was version 1.2. And we rolled this out, and eventually it evolved into Kubernetes as a service that was running for Bloomberg for a little while. And that was also the reason why I started doing chaos engineering to begin with. But I guess we're going to talk about that in a sec, right, too? It's actually SRE Day, despite the fact that it's called, that it's over 2 days in London. So SREday.com, not days. We don't want to make it too similar to DevOps Days, right?
Cool. So you also wrote a book, if I'm not mistaken, the Chaos Engineering Site Reliability Through Controlled Distribution.
Distraction. But yes. That's a book I wrote during the COVID days. Would you like me to tell you a little bit about it?
Yeah, well, what inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, so the backstory is actually, it's all because of Kubernetes. It's all Kubernetes' fault. I hope that's how you say that. I blame it for everything wrong in my life. Initially, when we were deploying that, there was no really good way of deploying that was considered best practices, right? You would just download all these binaries from GitHub. You would get, Kube API server here and scheduler and controller manager. You need to run it, CD, and things were being developed, and we were kind of on the forefront of that, and we're trying to figure it out. And over the time, over maybe next 6 to 12 months, the way to make sure that the things work the way they're supposed to be was to simulate some of the failures, right? So if we say that etcd is distributed and that's supposed to be resilient to one of the instances going down, let's go and find out if it actually is, right? So we started accumulating all the scripts with my team doing these things. And then that was roughly the time where Chaos Monkey came out and the principles of chaos.org was set up and all the cool guys on Netflix, they gave it a name, and I was like, oh, epiphany. Oops. It's supposed to be called Chaos Engineering. So I started calling it Chaos Engineering, and quickly that became like a thing that I was doing. I started talking about that at conferences. I did the talk at KubeCon way back, I think 2017 or 18. Chaos Conf came to be too. I also ended up talking about that too. We built a little tool called Powerful Seal that could basically take a YAML describing a scenario, like, introduce this failure and then validate that whatever you expect to happen is actually happening. For example, your service continues running or hits some kind of metric that you're interested in. And then, one day I got a weird email from Mike at Manning who was like, hey, you know what? maybe we should write a book about that. That sounds like a really cool thing. And that was 2019. And just before the pandemic, late 2019. I was also, that kind of links to the conferences stuff. That was one of the reasons why we started with my brother Mark Conf42. We wanted to try to gather a little bit of community around chaos engineering and reliability in London. And, it was all kind of very concentrated in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the cool guys. I wanted to do something about it. And we started preparing in 2019, and then we had the first one early 2020, and then all hell obviously broke loose. Everybody got sick, and things got weird for a long time. But I was stuck with writing a book that I committed to, and all of a sudden I had the extra time because I wasn't going to work. I was staying at home like everybody, and I literally managed to write the whole thing before work. So I would wake up at 5, have my coffee, write a couple of hours, and then go to work. And it happened. So the book is available. I think it was published 2021. And it tries to tell you what chaos engineering is and what it isn't. Because, spoiler alert, chaos engineering has a lot of marketing problems.
No, what's in the name, right?
Yeah, it's in the name.
Well, marketing problems? What kind of marketing?
Back in the day, the Chaos Engineering Inc., Evil Corp marketing department didn't do a particularly good job choosing the name. They wanted something spicy. They went with Chaos Monkey and the Chaos kind of stack. But it has a number of problems. One is that it sounds cool and makes for good presentations, but it makes it an order of magnitude or two harder to convince people above you in the food chain that it's a good idea, we should be doing that. And even in principle, if they agree that this is a good idea, they might just not like the word chaos on their timeline, and that might not like putting money on the table to fund stuff like that. So there is that. And there's also the chaos theory, where I don't know how many times I had to answer the question, so is that like the chaos theory in maths? No.
No. So one of the following questions is also one for those who are unfamiliar with the term. Can you explain chaos engineering beholds and why is that important? And also in the extension of that, what differs it from DevOps? But everybody knows DevOps.
Everybody knows DevOps, so let's bring it to something familiar. Okay. So chaos engineering is this discipline of experimenting on a piece of software, a system, typically distributed system, to increase your confidence in that system surviving difficult conditions. So typically what we're talking about is, it all started with Chaos Monkey. And the idea in Chaos Monkey was very, 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 very simple. We've got all these AWS instances. We've got a lot of them, and they die at the least convenient time. And, when you have 3 AWS instances, you might go for years without noticing that. But if you've got 50,000 or 100,000, the maths is mathing in a way that you end up noticing that. So the guys were like, okay, fine. So we now expect this kind of failure. So why don't we actually introduce that more often so that we can verify that the system recovers and we can observe it recovering and feel better about, the system and sleep better at night. And, there's this running joke that this is obviously a sleep aid for SREs and people on call. Because even if in the worst case scenario, your system, you find a bug in it, you find it during the working days rather than 4 a.m. 4 a.m. being obviously the best time to deal with outages. So this is really it, the idea. And then it slowly kind of evolved over time. People put meat on the bones and evolved into this kind of tool that I consider that a part of SRE toolkit. It doesn't really diverge from DevOps. I think it's completely compatible. To the people who share the point of view that SRE is an implementation of DevOps, I think that chaos engineering is basically an implementation detail, a tool that makes a lot of things easier. There's also the fact that, some of the systems become so difficult that not many people, if any, actually understand all the unwanted effects. And we also have this idea of emerging properties. So for example, the kind of canonical example is that you've got brain cells, you've got neurons in your head, in your brain, and one neuron is unremarkable. But then through the interaction of billions and billions of these things, you end up with funky things like consciousness and poetry and other things. And TikTok, also TikTok. So
TikTok disables everything in your mind.
Yeah, so the emerging properties is basically, like something that you didn't predict that happens. It happens a lot in nature. It happens, another example is your heart that behaves in a certain manner, but it's actually made of cells that are all pretty, unremarkable if you just look at them in isolation. The biologists in your audience, please don't kill me. I'm just, trying to find an example here. So with this big, if you scale of Netflix or something like that, you're going to be dealing with weird things like, an example is a thundering herd problem, where if you've got things that start cascading, restarting, then just the effect of many things like bootstrapping at startup might exhaust other resources. Maybe there's not enough network for every single service to start up, or maybe that puts unexpected load on, your image registry, anything really. And they're often hard to predict, especially, with hindsight, obviously everything's 2020. But a lot of these things, you wouldn't think about them. So it's good to be able to kind of bump into them, worst case scenario, even if you're doing that in production, which some people do. It's better to do it during the working hours.
We always see that databases.
Yeah,
you've got a max connections of databases, and if a lot of resources restart, your max connections is maxed out.
Yeah,
that's just a simple thing, but often overlooked.
And it's technically, not necessarily a bug in the sense that it's not like somebody, wrote the connection the wrong way or something like that. It's just that it's configured in a way that if something bad happens and you restart your entire fleet, you're going to have a bad time. So this is what helps dealing with, So again,
do you think every company benefits of a chaos engineering, how do you call that, strategy?
Let me put it this way. It's a very inexpensive way of finding potentially big problems. So it's typically a good return on investment. It's not something that you have to, it's not very difficult with existing tools to implement this kind of scenarios. It's more of a kind of like mindset shift when you stop pretending that bad things won't happen and hope for the best, that, you will have moved to the next company by the time something breaks here. And actually like just tackling this head on. So in that respect, I think there's probably majority of the companies that can benefit that. Where it really shines is obviously when you've got like this massive systems, but let's be honest here, not everybody's Google scale and not everything is web scale. Neither is Node.js. So
like small companies can benefit also from a strategy
for sure.
Chaos engineering.
And for sure.
And know any good tooling?
Oh man, the tooling. So I mentioned Powerful SEO. It's a little bit, I left it behind and it's not particularly well maintained. There's a few tools that developed in the open source, and then there are a few that are paid for. So Chaos Toolkit is one that's open source that I can recommend to anybody. It's fairly easy to use. You can use it as a CLI. Maybe it takes an hour or two for you to figure out how it works, but it lets you basically run these scenarios. I do this, I expect this to happen. If this didn't happen, then we have a problem. And it can talk to various APIs. It can, it's written in Python, by the way, so it's easily accessible. And most of the tools look something like that. Then you've got the more polished tools. Like, for example, if you have money, you can give that money to Gremlin. I was actually talking to them the other day, recording an episode for my own podcast of Colton from Gremlin. A little plug. And you can get, kind of pay money so that you don't have too rough of a starting learning curve. and you can just kind of go quickly to some return on investment. But I will say that, over the time, I think I realized one thing is that the tooling bit is the easy bit, actually. The harder bit is to make the difference, change how your engineers are thinking and behaving about the systems. That, developing a feature and then shipping into production is not actually the end of it. You actually want to test that afterwards in the context of the whole system, and you want to incorporate that into the practice. So, yeah, plenty of tools. I'm not going to name them all. I can Google all of that. I've also mentioned a bunch of them in my book, hint. But the harder bit is going to be changing how people behave.
Yeah, that's always the hardest thing, because if you go to Kubernetes, there's already a mindset of stateless, and this brings it that much further. But awesome. I will try Chaos Toolkit.
Yeah, but you also yourself worked on some projects, right? Like GoldPinger and Powerful Seal. Can you tell us a little bit more about those projects and if they had any what the role in the Kubernetes environment?
Sure thing. So I mentioned Powerful Seal already. This was the kind of thing that takes a YAML that says break this, check that thing works. It still works. It's just that I stopped working on it in the last few years when I left Bloomberg. GoldPinger is such a funny thing because I don't know. Back in the day, if you remember, we would use flannelD to do the networking layer for Kubernetes, and it's obviously evolved a whole lot since. But to me, that was a new technology. The entire encapsulation and the fact that now I have to actually make sure that this thing works, otherwise pods won't be able to talk to anything. And we had a few hiccups, let's just put it this way, initially when it stopped working the way it needed to, or it would think that it would have a different subnet to what it really needed to. And all of a sudden, the pods, as far as Kubernetes is concerned, they run fine, but they can't talk to anything. So because of those issues we had, I very quickly wrote this little thing that I called GoldPinger that basically has a small, tiny little daemon that runs on every one of your nodes that periodically pings all the other daemons on all the other nodes. And that gives you metrics and allows you to alert when there is like some kind of slowness that goes in. And it would be like HTTP pings. And later we added DNS and other things like, as well. But just a ping to check that the whole stack works and that nodes that get isolated and that the partitioning doesn't happen. And if you've got any hiccups, that they do recover. And the funny thing is about it is that it was very simple. It took like a day to write the initial version, and then obviously we later, one of my colleagues, Chris Green, shout out, he rewrote it in Go so that we have like this tiny little binary and super quick to start and doesn't require a massive Python interpreter for that.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is that like the next thing we noticed, it had like millions of downloads on Docker, and somebody I think from Azure told me that they now deploy that everywhere for their clusters.
Oh, nice.
To verify that. So it's like this tiny little bit of code that I wrote back in the day that, well, actually has been rewritten already, but it actually runs like millions of copies worldwide. It's so fun. And I'm always joking, if I got like $1 per pop, that would be really nice. But that's open source.
And the name got inspiration from Austin Powers, or?
Yeah, from GoldPinger.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, so I'm very proud of that name. I think one of my better names.
Yeah, I think it's a good name. Yeah. Bij ACC ICT staat alles in het teken van continuïteit waarborgen voor bedrijfskritische applicaties. Of het nu gaat over Managed OTAP, Cloud en Kubernetes, ze geven hier invulling aan om door samen met hun klanten een toekomstbestendige strategie uit te stippelen voor het gehele proces van ontwikkelen tot en met productie. Another thing related to you I found was UniKernels. How do they fit in your work as reliability and chaos engineering?
Oh man, the UniKernels. Yeah, so I've got deep interest in UniKernels. I think this is such a fundamentally nice idea, and especially in the context of something like Kubernetes, that we've now got all these containers that run on all kinds of weird versions of base images, and making sure that they're all stripped down and as secure as possible is a big problem, right? So the UniKernel, the idea is that you compile, basically some people call it library OSs, right? That you compile the OS with your application code, and you end up with a bootable example. And UniKernels is like this one of those ideas that I never understood why it didn't pick up more than it did. And I've been like just kind of waiting for it to make this breakthroughs and for everybody to start using it. But it turns out it's actually very niche. And I've got a friend who runs this little company called NanoVMs. And they specialize in UniKernels. And they've been doing that for a little while. And they found that people actually care less for UniKernels. They care less about the things that they expected them to care about, like the security vector that I just mentioned, and they care much more, or for example, the savings when you have less stuff like running, so you save a little bit on hardware. But they actually found that people cared more about just ease of use, and if the ease of use is good, they're gonna use it. If the ease of use is not that good, they're just not gonna use it, despite all the other benefits. So yeah, I'm still kind of, it's years later. And I'm still waiting for that to become a big thing. And, every day I log into Hacker News and I'm wondering, is it today? And,
is it today? Yeah.
It's
so far
the year of the Linux desktop. That's also a meme.
Yeah, or the phone. But
No, Linux phone is not coming.
yeah, that's I guess that's a topic for another podcast. But things humans are weird.
Yeah, because if you look at UniKernels, and when I heard Kubernetes and kernels, I always automatically my mind goes now to eBPF.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of happening between kernels and in Kubernetes. I don't know if there's a relationship to make between UniKernels and eBPF, or if there is some hook that those two can work with each other.
Yeah,
it's a nice concept, compiling your OS with your application. It's an awesome concept, but I think we're still traditionally bound to I'm building my application on an OS. And like Dockers are also built like that. It's an OS and then your application. So,
but you also got Talos right now, right? That's an OS specifically designed to run Kubernetes. So stripped down.
That's different. That's a different.
It's a different approach. Yes, it's kind of like top down versus bottom up, right? With UniKernels. I mean, you should probably go and talk to Jan Eiberg. He's the founder of NanoVMs, and he's probably the most knowledgeable person I know who spent like good chunk of a decade now trying to push that. But yeah, it's like the bottom up, right? You build it, and then nothing that you don't need is included. So that, in terms of attack vectors and stuff like that, well, nobody's gonna find an old version of an SSH server there because, hey, there isn't an SSH server, and that helps.
Yeah.
And Talos, they've got this other approach, right? We're just gonna strip it down, lock it down as much as possible, make as much stuff immutable as possible, but keep it to something that people are familiar with already, right? The APIs and the tooling and all of that. I see both approaches having advantages and disadvantages. I'm just still kind of surprised that UniKernels are not more popular than they are.
Well, we will spread the word. that helps.
UniKernels everywhere.
To make a switch to SRE, how does Kubernetes enhance the principles and practices of SRE? And do you have any vision on that part?
That's a good question. I mean, I kind of am of two minds to it. Like, the initial starry-eyed version of me, I remember when we got Kubernetes and all of a sudden we had, all this metrics and we had APIs we could talk to and we could like see things in real time. And that, as far as I'm concerned, Kubernetes basically became the API for deploying anything, right? Wherever you go now, there's going to be a Kubernetes API somewhere you can hit. So it's kind of like a little bit like the English of the tech world. This is now the Kubernetes API plays the same role, right? But obviously there's a but there, and there's also the fact that when all you have is a big hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And Kubernetes is a particularly heavy and particularly big hammer. So I see a lot of people who probably have no business using Kubernetes using Kubernetes because it's cool, and also it's web scale. So I think that it's kind of like a double-edged sword. In one way, I think it's a blessing that we all have a single API, and if CNCF and insert here the usual joke about how you can't find anything about anything on the CNCF map because the logos are now 2 pixel big. It is a sign of just how successful it was and how big of a Cambrian explosion we've seen with all the startups doing things, and letting alone the fact that maybe some of them shouldn't be doing what they're doing. The fact that they can plug into this and it's all kind of compatible and this entire ecosystem works is mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like that, and it's kind of really cool. But yeah, the aspect of too big of a hammer and too many nails is probably not going to go away. There's also, fashion in technology. Another topic for another day, but it's strong. It's always been strong.
Fashion in technology. I'm
Fashion
not
in
wearing a
technology.
dress. I'm not gonna wear it.
Well, you get a lot of T-shirts at the event, so that's also some
t-shirt
kind of fashion.
Yeah, half of my wardrobe has something to do with Kubernetes.
Yeah. Mine is also growing very quickly, yeah. So about SRE, in November you were hosting SRE Day in Amsterdam. Can you share with us your vision and goals for bringing SRE Day to a new city?
Sure. So, we're very excited this year. So we've been doing the London SRE Days in person for 3 years now. And it kept growing. And it's a really cool event because we've got the cinema we're renting out, and you get to eat wherever you want in the cinema. And they've got these couches instead of seats. So we've got 3 screens, got 50 talks, and it's like an SRE extravaganza. So we've got a mix of, lessons and people sharing new tools and just networking, and seeing that there are other people that made this questionable life choice of being an SRE makes you feel better, right? And this year we've been fortunate to expand internationally. So we did one in San Francisco. We were lucky enough to team up with Harness to use their office for the event, and in June we flew and we organized one in San Francisco. And then we're also doing, like you mentioned, in November, 21st of November, Amsterdam. And Amsterdam is kind of demand-driven. There were enough people who said, hey, why is there not one in Amsterdam? That we obliged. We're like, okay, well, you've got a point there. Let's make it happen. We're hoping to expand more. There's going to be another one coming in San Francisco sometime in November. And next year, we're currently planning Tokyo and Singapore for the first editions. So we're going to do a lot of flying.
Yeah. Tokyo sounds nice. Where can I sign up?
Yeah, so we almost had the date locked down for January for Tokyo, but it turns out that not speaking Japanese doesn't help too much. And there was already a conference around that time that was announced. So we decided to not conflict with them and move it a little bit. But yeah, I'll definitely let you know. It's all on SREday.
Yeah, I'm starting a Japanese course in the next month. For 3 months, I will practicing and learning in Japanese. So maybe I can help out after that. So just a shameless plug on my side this time.
Awesome.
So you've got a lot of speakers on the SRE Days in Amsterdam.
We do. So initially we're going to, we typically we're starting when we do a new location with just one track to keep things simple and easy. But we actually had 120 submissions for it. So we felt bad rejecting 90-something% of them. So we've now arranged for 2 tracks. So we're going to have about 20 speakers, 2 tracks, 10 each on the day. So do come. We're finalizing now the extra people who are going to join now, and we're going to update the website this weekend. So by the time you hear that, it's probably going to be in there. And we try to focus on more community-driven ones, keep it to a minimum, like the commercial side of things, and share lessons from the battlefield and production use and all of that, so that it feels like a bigger meetup rather than like a commercial endeavor.
Yeah, I see AWS is coming, ING, that's a Dutch company, of course.
It is a company. Yeah, you got that right. Yeah, we're gonna have an also keynote from Ricardo Carlesso, SRE. What was the title? SRE gone wrong. I think the 7 top errors that people do. I've got a sneak peek of what it's gonna be like. So I think you're gonna love it too.
Awesome.
So yeah, I've got a little bit of the usual suspects, your Googles of the world, and some startups. But we're also going to have a mix of workplaces like universities and stuff like that.
Oh, nice. And we will be there. So that's nice.
Yeah,
and exactly. They will be there.
They will be there.
One Go containerless with Kubernetes with WebAssembly. I think that's an awesome topic to have in the podcast also.
WebAssembly.
No, Go containerless.
The WebAssembly is doing
Kubernetes.
Weird things. You should check it out. Yeah.
I think, whoa. That's, I'm just seeing that. I think that's awesome. But yeah. yeah,
for sure.
I'm gonna have fun.
Yes.
So,
for those who are interested, Miko, in attending or participating in the SRE Days Amsterdam, where can they find more information and how can they get involved?
Oh, thank you for asking. I wasn't expecting you to say that. They go to SREday, without the S.com, and they click on Amsterdam. And they've got the tickets, they've got the lineup, they've got all the details and all the beautiful thumbnails on everybody's faces to see if their favorite speakers are there. We're going to do it at the Pong Bar. I don't know, for your locals, they probably know the place. It's supposed to be really nice. So we'll have some food, we'll have some talks, and we're going to hang out. It's going to be cool.
So looking a bit into the future, what are, in your regard, the emerging trends in Chaos Engineering and site reliability engineering? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, ironically, funnily, at the very least, Chaos Engineering has been basically rebranded to be Reliability Engineering now because it sounds so much better and goes down as so much better. So that's one of the things. We kind of stopped focusing so much on the funky aspect of, oh yeah, let's break things on purpose, and look, I'm testing in prod and I'm not being a moron, it's all good. And we focus more on the benefits of that and the positive aspects of focusing on reliability. So you probably won't hear me talking about Chaos Engineering all that much, and I'll be talking more about reliability engineering. Site reliability engineering, SRE, is an interesting one because this was led for the very, very long time by Google, right? This is where it originated. This is where the original books came from, and everybody was trying to replicate Google. The problem is that not everybody is Google, and not everybody is Google scale. So a lot of the things that they talk about there, they might not necessarily make sense if you're a tiny startup. That's not to say that you can't derive value from that, most of it. But you need to be a bit flexible, right? And there's no real need for dogma that will tell you that, oh, you're not a real SRE. If you go to Reddit/SRE, it's a funky place. I recommend you go and checking it out. There's going to be a person that I guarantee you every few weeks coming and asking, oh, guys, am I a real SRE? I feel like, I've got some kind of identity crisis. Most of the things I do are DevOps. And then I do a little bit of hacking here and there, and I do some monitoring. Am I really an SRE? Is this world real? Is this all a simulation? So, I think
that's a topic for another podcast.
What's my purpose, right? And
Yeah.
and I don't know if we're necessarily going to ever resolve that, very philosophical debacle here. But what I do know is that from the practical point of view, take as much of it as you can and try to basically automate yourself out of the job, whatever that means for you, right? If you don't have 10,000 servers you're managing, maybe don't be too shy about it. Maybe managing 100 is also okay if you're doing a good job, and you shouldn't feel bad about it at night. So I think that over the time, we're kind of now taking it more as a community, right? And we're looking maybe less towards one company to show us the way. I don't know if that's necessarily, that might be a sign that, the Google name and brand might be softening a little bit. Please don't sue me. But it could also be seen as just a community taking more active interest in taking whatever SRE is supposed to mean in the direction that makes sense for everybody. Yeah.
Awesome. So if people want to get in touch with you, how can we do that?
Sure. So I'm active on LinkedIn. If you look up Miko Pawlikowski on LinkedIn, please feel free to reach out. If you are interested in what I'm interested in, I've got a podcast called Hockey Stick Show. Hockeystick.show is where you can find it, where I talk about everything and anything to do with breakthroughs, be that in tech, business, or personal performance as well. So we're going to talk about everything from quantum physics to SRE, to AI, because obviously you can't not talk about the AI these days, to code plunges and how to optimize your workout and sleep routine and that kind of stuff. So if you like what you're hearing, head to hockeystick.show.
Nice. We will put the link in the podcast description, so people like that. They have it easy. Yeah. How do you see the future of Kubernetes? So if you have a crystal ball, let's be philosophical about it.
Yeah, well, the future. I left my crystal ball in the other room, so I think I'm going to have to do it myself. So I think a few things are clear at this stage, right? Even if we all collectively decide that Kubernetes was a terrible idea, it's not going to go anywhere. We're too invested in that. It's all over the place. So I foresee that continuing to be the API for the world, even for a few years after the next big thing came, and it's so much better. And it's AI first, and crypto distributed, and all other keywords. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think what we're probably going to see is, unfortunately, plateauing and marginal gains getting slimmer and slimmer. I think, we kind of see this amazing offshoots. You mentioned eBPF earlier, and I was listening to the episode about eBPF earlier on. And, for me, it was a mind-blowing moment. Like, that was the first time when I actually developed a real interest in the internals of Linux kernel. And I was like browsing through that and seeing, what is it? What else can I actually go and resurface? And this is so cool. I can get all this information and now understand better how it works. And is actually fairly, performant, and I've got all this abstraction, all this tooling rather that lets me do it quickly. And it kind of felt like the next level after sudo. It's like sudo make me a sandwich, and then there's like eBPF. This is even deeper, and feel like a hacker for a little bit. And then that resulted in all those observability tools that we now have, and we can look at the very low level without breaking the bank, and it's just part of the ecosystem, right? You can confirm things that you couldn't before. So I think we're going to probably continue seeing developments like that just because of the scale and the number of people who work on that. And I, for one, definitely would welcome that. So on one hand, I expect we're going to be plateauing, and this thing has so much inertia now that even if you came up with something much better tomorrow, it would take years for it to replace it probably. At the same time, I'm also optimistic. Enough people wanting to do something about it and there will be interesting breakthroughs. So I'm going to go consult my ball later, but that's the best I can do without it.
Okay.
Awesome.
And then maybe some UniKernels along the way.
Sprinkle of UniKernels. Never does
the sprinkle, yeah. Jan, anything to add?
No, thank you very much, Miko, for talking to us.
A very
Thank you so
smooth
much for
episode.
hosting me.
We just were rolling with it. It's very nice talking to you about this kind of stuff. And I'm
we'll
sure
see you
after
on-
this episode, I will have a lot more questions, but I will save them for November.
Yeah.
Right. Then I don't know if that was a
Every day.
good episode if you end up with more questions than you had before, but let's hope so.
Wait for part 2,
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you
It was
very much,
pleasure.
man, and
Appreciate
see you soon. Deze podcast is een initiatief van ACC ICT en wij zijn te beluisteren op onze website k8spodcast.nl via Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast en alle andere favoriete podcastproviders.